We are starting the next chapter, that is chapter number 19, adjustments in preparation of financial statements. See, this chapter is actually the continuation of previous chapter, financial statements. So already you have learned how to do the financial statements. Which are the financial statements that we learned? We have trading and profit and loss account and the balance sheet. So based on this, we have to do certain adjustments. See, why we are doing these adjustments? Because most of the firms will be following accrual concept. That also you have learned. What is accrual concept? Even if the amount is not received, you will record it in your books. That means receipt and receivable, similarly paid and payable will be recorded in the books when we follow accrual basis. We have accrual and cash basis. Most of the firms will be following accrual basis of accounting. So that is why we will have to take certain adjustments into consideration. Suppose you have an item like outstanding salary. What do you mean by outstanding salary? That means salary which is payable but not yet paid. So payable item, it's a liability. Should we consider or should we include such an item in your books? Yes, you will have to. See, though it is not spent, it is something which you have to pay this year. It is payable by your firm and which should reduce your profit. Isn't it? If you have an outstanding salary of rupees 50,000, shouldn't we include that also in the P&L account so that your profit will reduce? If you don't include that outstanding salary, what will happen? Your profit will be more. That means your financial statements will not show a true and fair view of the position, the financial position. The correct financial position will not be able to understand if we don't include these kind of adjustments. So that is why we are including these outstanding items, accrued items, income received in advance, prepaid expenses. All these adjustments we'll have to consider. And inside the trial balance, normally these items will not appear. If you look into the previous chapter, we discussed the trial balance was given, and inside the trial balance, did we see anywhere the items like outstanding expenses, prepaid expenses? No, we didn't see anywhere these items, because these items will be written usually as adjustments. So in this chapter, after your trial balance, I am talking about the question, after your trial balance, you can see certain adjustments. Understood? And while you do the trial balance, that is trading P&L and the balance sheet, you will have to include these adjustments also. Then only you can understand the actual financial position and the financial performance. The trading and P&L account shows the financial performance of the business. It is also known as income statement. Then balance sheet also known as position statement because it shows the financial position. The other one shows the financial performance, the income statement. Okay. So in this chapter we will be discussing the adjustments. Chapter is lengthy, so you have to listen carefully, study carefully. Chapter is important also, not only lengthy, it is important. That's why it's lengthy. So we'll start with the first one. Items are familiar to you, only the adjustments you need to learn. The first one you write closing stock, or it's also known as inventory. So closing stock or inventory, that means stock at the end of the year, that's called closing stock. So how to treat this closing stock, that's a question. Knowingly or unknowingly, you are taking this item into consideration while you prepare the financial statements. Last chapter also you have done the same. See, we were not given closing stock as adjustment specifically in the previous chapter, but if you turn your pages and see the question pattern, after the trial balance, they would have written one sentence like closing stock for the year amounted to rupees so much. So usually it is given as an adjustment. Once it is given outside the trial balance, the meaning is it is an adjustment. And closing stock and all adjustments you have to write or record two times, twice in the financial statements, either in trading P&L then in balance sheet. So that you will have to do all adjustments, we will have to record 2 times. Why we are recording it 2 times or twice? Because we are following double entry system or dual aspect. That means a debit aspect and a credit aspect will be there. So twice we are recording each and every item. So these adjustments means one which is given outside the trial balance or after the trial balance, and you have to record these items twice in the financial statements. So you remember the double effect of closing stock. Last chapter what did you do? Closing stock, first it was recorded on the credit side of trading account. You used to write it as buy closing stock, isn't it? Then later you recorded it on the asset side of the balance sheet. This was recorded as a current asset. Understood? So this is the double effect of closing stock. Clear? Once on the credit side of trading, later in the balance sheet asset side. So this effect you have already learned last chapter and all, we are doing the same. And what is the journal entry for closing stock that you have learned in the chapter journal? Closing stock account debtor to trading account. The same thing we posted in trading. Closing stock account debtor to trading. So how will you post it in trading? It will be recorded as buy closing stock. Okay. So this is the double effect of closing stock. You just write like this. No need to write it as sentence. This will be easier for you to understand. So just write like this. Then, okay, you give one heading. Closing stock is not over. You give one heading. When closing stock is given in the trial balance. When closing stock is given in the trial balance. Okay. So when it is given inside the trial balance, should we record it 2 times? No. Then it is not an adjustment. You need to record only once in the financial statements. So where will you record it first, or where will you record this particular item closing stock when it appears inside the trial balance? Where will you record this? If you get an item inside the trial balance, what you have to do is look into the nature of the item. See what is the basic nature of that item given. So here closing stock means it is basically an asset. It is a current asset. Okay, at least you identify whether it is asset, expense, liability or income. Okay, though you don't classify it like fixed assets and current assets. So you understood closing stock is an asset. So assets are usually recorded on the asset side of the balance sheet. Understood? So when closing stock is given inside the trial balance, meaning is it is not an adjustment, it need to be recorded only once in the financial statements. And where will you record it? For that you have to see the nature, the basic nature of closing stock. The basic nature is an asset. So it should be recorded on the asset side of the balance sheet. Here you will write it as closing stock. Only in the balance sheet you will be recording when it appears inside the trial balance. Understood? Only in the balance sheet. If it is given as an adjustment, you have to record it 2 times. Otherwise, look into the nature of the item, then you have to record accordingly. If it is an asset, it will be recorded only on the asset side. If the basic nature is a liability, it will be recorded only on the liability side. Understood? Okay, so that also you have to write. You give this heading and just write like this when it appears inside the trial balance. The second adjustment is outstanding expenses or expenses due but not paid. Okay, it has become due but we haven't paid yet. So that's like payable item. So the basic nature is liability and it is a current liability, the outstanding items. And what's the journal entry for outstanding expenses? That also you have learned. That is expenses or concerned expenses account debtor to outstanding expense, isn't it? Now we will see what is the double effect of outstanding expenses. So you give the heading when outstanding expenses are given outside the trial balance. Okay, for closing stock also you write the heading. The first one you didn't write the heading, no, the double effect. You write here closing stock when it is given outside the trial balance. Inside the trial balance you have written the heading. Similarly on the top you write, here you write when closing stock is given outside the trial balance. Within brackets you can write as adjustments. Okay, now coming back to this outstanding expenses, now you give the heading, the second one. When outstanding expenses are given outside the trial balance, or within brackets you write given as adjustments. Okay, outstanding expenses also it is termed as due, expenses due but not paid. You should be familiar with both these terms. Okay, now outstanding expenses, we know that it should be recorded 2 times if it is an adjustment. So now in the first case it is considered as an adjustment. So first, where will you record this item? Suppose the item is outstanding salary. So now you understood that it is related to salary. The concerned expense is salary and this outstanding salary is related to salary. So the meaning also you know, it is payable. So suppose you have a salary of, this one you need not write, you just have to understand. Salary suppose given inside the trial balance like 50,000, and as an adjustment will come after the trial balance or outside the trial balance. Adjustment is given like salary outstanding rupees 20,000. Okay, and this particular item outstanding salary is an adjustment and this 20,000 you have to record 2 times. Okay, so first we will see salary 50,000. Should we record it 2 times or twice? No need, because it's not an adjustment. So see the basic nature of the item. Salary is an indirect expense and usually we'll be recording salary in the P&L account, isn't it? Since it is an indirect expense, it will be recorded on the debit side of P&L. To salary, you have to write that 50,000 in the inner column since you have an adjustment related to salary. Okay, so this is the usual treatment that you did in the previous chapter. Salary being an indirect expense, you have to record it on the debit side. So to salary, that 50,000 which is given inside the trial balance, that figure you have to take. Now we will consider the adjustment. This is an amount which is payable this year, isn't it? Though we have not paid it, it should be considered since we are following accrual basis. And what should we do with that outstanding salary? Should we add with this 50 or should we less from this 50? This 20,000 is payable amount by your firm. So that amount should be added with this. Understood? 50,000 already you have paid. Along with that you are supposed to pay 20,000 more. So altogether your salary payable or the salary which you have to pay is 70,000 for that particular year. All these figures are just examples. Did you understand the effect of salary outstanding which we have to add with that concerned salary? That means with that 50 we have to add that 20 also, because 20,000 is payable this year. So that should be added, then only we will get the correct profit. So add salary outstanding 20,000, outer column you write 70,000. This is the debit side, okay, debit side of P&L account. So once we have to add it with the concerned expense on the debit side of P&L, later what will you do? Later you have to show this in the balance sheet. 2 times you have to record, no. But will you record that 50,000 again? No, you can't. Because 50,000 is the salary which is given inside the trial balance. It is not an adjustment. It need to be recorded only once that we finished. Next, the salary outstanding 20,000 you have to record 2 times. So now we will be recording it on the liability side of the balance sheet because it is a current liability. So here we will write salary outstanding 20,000. Understood? This salary is just an example. Any outstanding expense will be treated like this. Okay, will be written like this. Treated means will be recorded like this. So if you want to write the question, you can. Question means this is how your question will be. So if you want, you write this and then you write this P&L and the balance sheet, how it will appear in P&L and the balance sheet, or else directly you write this one. Okay, no need of writing the figures and all. If you write the question, write the figures also, or else just put some X here instead of writing the actual amount. And you can write, instead of writing 2 salary, if you want, you write 2 expenses. Since we are writing the format, you can write here 2 expenses, add outstanding expenses. Okay, or else just copy the same. No need to make any confusions. But you have to understand one thing, every outstanding expenses will be done in the same way, not only salary outstanding. This was just an example. Then third adjustment is prepaid expenses. You write third one, prepaid expenses or unexpired expenses or expenses paid in advance. Prepaid or unexpired or expenses paid in advance. All these are given in your textbook in chapter number 19. All these headings and its treatments are there. You need not read it in detail. You might get confused, so better you write like this. They have given as sentences as paragraphs. You write like this in the format of P&L and the balance sheet, so easily you can understand the effect. Okay, so prepaid expenses, the basic nature you all know, it is an asset. Something you paid in advance, it's an asset. It's like for the next year, we paid this year itself. You had like prepaid rent. It was actually next year's rent, but you paid this year itself. It's called prepaid rent. It's an asset, and you write the first heading when it is. Oh, we didn't write this one, isn't it? That outstanding salary when it is given inside the trial balance. Okay, you just write that outstanding salary. You just take the second subhead. You write when outstanding salary is given inside the trial balance. Inside the trial balance. Now, is it an adjustment? It is not an adjustment when it is given inside. So, what we should do? We need to record only once. And where will you write it? For that, you have to see the basic nature of that outstanding item. The basic nature is a liability. So, basic nature, since it is a liability, where will you record it? It must be recorded only on the liability side of the balance sheet. Only this part you need to write for the second subhead. Understood? Just repeat that. Balance sheet, just show it on the liability side. Okay? Only on the liability side of the balance sheet. Will you write it in P&L? No, this one you can't write when it is given inside the trial balance. So, only once you need to record. Okay, again moving on to that prepaid expenses. You write the first subhead when it is given outside the trial balance. Within brackets you can write as an adjustment. So, how many times we have to write? You will have to record it 2 times. First, where will you write? It is prepaid expense. It is related to one particular expense. Here the item which I took is rent. So, if you have like prepaid rent, that means it is related to this item called rent. So, suppose if in your question you have, this is a question which I am writing, inside the trial balance they have given one rent amount for rupees 20,000. This is not an adjustment. One which is given inside the trial balance means it is not an adjustment. Now, what I am writing now is adjustment, that is rent prepaid rupees 2000. If this is the question, while you do P&L account, you know that this rent of 20,000, that rent of 20,000 you need to record on the debit side of P&L, being an indirect expense. Now, since this rent is having an adjustment, you should write the amount in the inner column. This 20,000 we wrote in the inner column. Now we will consider this adjustment prepaid rent of 2,000. It is actually next year's expense, but you paid this year. That's the meaning. Should it reduce this year's profit? When you include that 2,000 in this 20, you have included it. Prepaid means already you paid it this year itself, though it is for next year. So it is reducing this year's profit, isn't it? Since you paid that 2,000 also, it is reducing this year's profit. But is it needed? It's actually next year's expense. It should reduce only next year's profit. Okay, so this year while you do the financial statements, what should we do? Prepaid rent must be deducted. I mean, not only prepaid rent, all prepaid expenses will be or must be deducted. Understood? And write within brackets since it is negative figure. So it is 20,000 less 2,000. Why we deducted? Because it's actually next year's expense. So this shouldn't reduce this year's profit. So we deducted it. So this year's expense is just rupees 18,000, which you have to show it in the P&L account. Now what we have to do is, inside the balance sheet also you have to show the same item, because this prepaid rent is an adjustment. You know that adjustments are to be recorded 2 times. So first we deducted it from P&L debit side. Now we have to show this on the asset side. This prepaid rent of 2,000 you have to show in the asset side of the balance sheet. Will you write this 20,000 again? No, you should not. That is given inside the trial balance. It is not an adjustment, only once you need to write. Whereas prepaid rent being an adjustment, we recorded it 2 times. Okay. Then second subhead of the same item, that is prepaid item. So prepaid rent, it is also known as paid in advance or unexpired expense. So you should be familiar with all these terms. So now when you write this prepaid rent, when it is given inside the trial balance, what should we do when it is given inside the trial balance? This will be your answer. Understood? When it is given inside the trial balance, that means it is now not an adjustment. Okay? So once only you need to write. The question is where to write. Is it in trading, P&L or balance sheet? So what should we do? You have to see the basic nature of this item, and the basic nature is an asset. So asset, we know that it must be recorded in the balance sheet. Okay. So when it is given inside the trial balance, this portion you have to repeat, only this one. Okay. Then fourth one, again that is related to this, accrued incomes. You write accrued incomes or outstanding income. Accrued or outstanding income. Accrued incomes means incomes which is receivable. Outstanding expense means expenses which are payable, but outstanding income means incomes which are receivable. Don't get confused. So it is known as accrued income or outstanding income. Meaning is incomes which are receivable. Receivable items, basically they are assets. So all these you have learnt before. So what's a journal entry for outstanding incomes? That also you know. Accrued incomes, you remember accrued income, account debtor to concerned income. The same journal entry here. Okay, now we will discuss about the adjustment, the double effect. So what's the first subhead you have to write? You have to write it as when it is given outside the trial balance. The same thing we will repeat. When it is given outside the trial balance, or within brackets you can write as adjustments. So when it is given outside the trial balance, 2 times we have to record. Suppose you have an item like commission. I am not writing the question directly, I am just entering it in P&L. So this accrued incomes means it is related to one particular income. So you have an adjustment, suppose like accrued commission. Okay, accrued commission you have as adjustments. Then inside the trial balance you have an item like commission, and the amount is given 30,000. Accrued commission is given 3,000. Okay. So commission, where will you record in the financial statement? It must be recorded on the credit side of P&L. Why on the credit side? Because here this is an income. I have told you if nothing is mentioned, it is paid item, it is an expense, but here actually I have written this 30 in the credit column of trial balance. So crediting commission means it is an income. So record it on the credit side by commission. The 30,000 must come in the inner column, because now we have an adjustment related to this accrued commission. It is receivable item which we have to add this year. We have to receive not only 30, but that accrued amount also we have to add and take. That is 3,000 we'll add. So now outer column the amount will be 33,000. This is how you have to do the P&L account. Later in the balance sheet also you have to show this particular item. Which one will you show in the balance sheet? Only the accrued commission or the accrued income, because other one is not an adjustment. Okay, only adjustment you need to record in the, you need to record twice. So we'll write accrued commission, where being an asset, it must be recorded on the asset side of the balance sheet. Okay, and it is the current asset actually. 3,000 is the amount. This is a current asset. When you write the balance sheet items, don't write to and by. Don't use any prefix for the balance sheet, but for trading P&L you must have on the debit side to and on the credit side by. Here no prefix should be written. Okay, then the next subhead, when accrued incomes or outstanding incomes are given inside the trial balance. If it is given inside, you have to see the basic nature. The basic nature is an asset. This is the answer for the second subhead. Only in the balance sheet you will be showing. Okay. Then so you have to repeat this. Though I am not repeating it again, you have to write the second subhead and write this particular portion. Then fifth one, unearned income or income received in advance. Unearned income or income received in advance. Okay. So what you receive in advance is basically a liability. What you pay in advance is an asset. What you receive in advance is a liability. So now we are getting this item as adjustment. So first subhead you write when income received in advance or unearned income given outside the trial balance. That means as an adjustment. The same subheads we are repeating, but the double effect will be different. So suppose trial balance you have like interest received 2,000 given on the credit side. Though it is not specified in the credit column, it's understood because received means it's an income. Then as an adjustment they have written like interest received in advance. So this is an adjustment. This 500 is an adjustment that we have to write 2 times. So first P&L while you do, how will you write that interest received of 2,000? That is not an adjustment. Being an income, it must be recorded on the credit side of P&L. We will write by interest 2,000 in the inner column because there is an adjustment. And this interest received in advance, what we received in advance, actually this might be for the next year, but we have received this year itself. So we have included that interest in this 2,000. Are we supposed to do that? Are we supposed to increase our profit like this? No, because that is actually, that 500 is actually next year's income, but we received in advance. So what should we do now? We have to less it. Why we are deducting it? Because it is actually next year's income, and this should not increase this year's profit. So we are deducting it. Okay. So less interest received in advance, the balance 1,500 you can write in the inner column. Then the balance sheet you have to do. You know that this 500 is a liability. It's an adjustment. We have to write it twice. So we'll record it on the liability side because something you receive in advance is a liability. That 500 will record, and it is a current liability here. Okay. So these are the basic items you have to learn in this chapter. Basic items. Till we have many more items. So first you must be thorough with these 5 items. Okay. The double effect you must learn. Don't by heart. Just think whether it is this year's income. Since this is actually the next year's income, we deducted it. If it is this year's, you can add that accrued income. Why we add it? Because that is this year's income. That is receivable this year. So we add it. If it is not this year's, you less it. Okay. Then balance sheet also you have to record. The second subhead you write for this item income received in advance. You write when it is given inside the trial balance. So inside the trial balance means not an adjustment. You have to see the basic nature. The basic nature is a liability, and this will be the answer. Repeat this portion. The balance sheet only you will be showing if it is given inside the trial balance. Balance sheet only means this item only in the balance sheet. We will be doing the entire statement, trading P&L and the balance sheet. But if this particular item is given inside the trial balance, show it only on the liability side. Don't do this. Okay. So study these 5 adjustments carefully.